This audiobook is not here to inspire you. It is here to forge you. Inspiration wears off. Motivation comes and goes with the weather. But training rewires the architecture of how you think, how you respond, and who you become when everything around you is falling apart. Most people don't lose in life because they lack intelligence. They lose because they lack training. An untrained mind collapses under weight. It panics when the pressure rises. It freezes at the exact moment clarity is needed most. It surrenders control to emotions, to circumstances, to other people's behavior, and the moment that control is gone, everything downstream follows. Life does not test your knowledge first. It does not test your talent. It tests your composure. It tests your ability to stay deliberate when chaos arrives. It tests your capacity to remain grounded when every instinct in your body is screaming to react. If you have not trained your mind for those moments will expose every weakness you have been hiding. This audiobook was built for those moments. The moment when your chest tightens and panic wants to take over. The moment when someone says the wrong thing and anger wants to move through you like fire. The moment when failure lands hard and your mind starts writing a story you cannot afford to believe. The moment when one uncontrolled reaction could cost you everything. Your credibility, your relationships, your direction, your self-respect. Winning in life is not about always being right. It is not about being the loudest, the most confident, or the most talented person in the room. Winning is about staying controlled long enough to make the right move. That is what mental training produces. Not positive thinking. Not daily affirmations. Not motivational hype. Training. Deliberate, structured, repeated training, the same way the body requires resistance to grow stronger, the mind requires discipline, structure, and repetition to become reliable under pressure. Without that training, the mind defaults to reaction. Reactive minds flee from discomfort. Reactive minds make decisions to find relief rather than to build strength. Reactive minds hand power to whoever or whatever managed to trigger them. Trained minds operate from an entirely different place. They pause. They observe. They choose. And that pause, that small, quiet space between stimulus and response, is where power lives. That pause is what separates people who get controlled from people who stay in control. This audiobook is designed to help you build that pause. Not once. Not in a single moment of clarity. Consistently, in the small moments, in the ordinary irritations, in the situations that seem minor but compound into your character over time. You do not need to change your personality to benefit from what follows. You do not need to become cold, emotionless, or robotic. You need to become stable. Calm under pressure is not a trait you are born with or without. It is a trained skill. Discipline is not something you either possess or lack. It is something constructed through repeated standards and deliberate action. Clarity in chaos is not luck. It is the result of a mind conditioned to cut through noise and lock onto what actually matters. In every difficult situation, there is a winner and there is a reactor. The winner does not always succeed immediately. But they maintain control. They keep their leverage. The reactor may feel justified, expressive, and emotionally honest, but they lose position. They lose respect. They lose the frame. This audiobook is about moving you permanently from reaction into control. From impulse into intention. From emotional decision-making into disciplined action. Over the next 70 minutes, you will work through 8 core mental training principles. Each Chapter targets one specific skill, not theory, not philosophy, not entertainment. Training. Principles you can apply immediately in real situations. You will learn how to stay calm when pressure rises. How to take ownership of your reactions before they take ownership of you. How to build mental endurance when the discomfort refuses to leave. How to think clearly when situations feel chaotic. How to retrain the voice inside your head, rather than being governed by it. How to show up with full consistency even when motivation has completely disappeared. This is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming reliable. Reliable when the stakes are high. Reliable when no one is watching. Reliable in the moments that define direction. Because the person you become in your most difficult moments is the person who determines the course of your entire life. When your mind is trained, you stop asking what if things go wrong. You stop planning for failure. You stop living in the anxiety of uncertainty. You begin operating from a different place entirely. One that says, whatever arrives, I remain in control. That shift changes everything. This audiobook does not promise a shortcut. It does not promise that listening once will rewire years of ingrained habit. What it offers is something far more valuable, a system. A way of thinking. A way of responding. A way of showing up that, applied consistently, transforms who you are under pressure. If you listen passively, you will feel good for a few minutes and nothing will change. If you listen with intention, noticing where your current patterns conflict with what you hear, noticing the discomfort, sitting with it rather than escaping it, your internal standards will rise. And when your standards rise, your behavior follows. Not immediately. Not dramatically. But reliably. And reliability is what wins. Throughout these chapters, you will hear core principles return in different forms. That repetition is not an accident. It mirrors how training actually works. You do not build strength by lifting once. You do not build discipline by deciding once. You do not build control by understanding once. You build it by returning again and again. So as you listen, do not rush. Let the ideas land. Notice where they collide with your habits. That collision is part of the training. By the end of this audiobook, you will not be a different person. But you will be more grounded. More deliberate, more difficult to destabilize. And that is where winning actually starts. Not with motivation. Not with confidence. With a trained mind. Let's begin. Chapter 1, Win Your Inner Game First. Winning never begins outside of you. It begins in the space most people never think to train, the inner game. Before results show up in your career, your relationships, or your decisions, they show up in your thoughts. Before you lose a situation externally, you have already lost it internally. The internal loss is quiet. It happens when doubt interrupts your focus at the exact moment focus is needed. It happens when emotion hijacks your judgment before your reasoning has a chance to engage. It happens when hesitation replaces clarity and you take a half step when a full one was required. By the time the external failure becomes visible, the inner battle is already over. That is why mental training is not optional. It is foundational. An unstable inner world cannot sustain any strategy. A chaotic inner world cannot hold any opportunity long enough for it to produce results. The first rule of mental training is simple and absolute: you must win inside before you can win outside. Most people attempt to fix outcomes without addressing the system that generates them. They chase new habits without training the mindset that will break those habits the moment pressure arrives. They want confidence without building the behaviors that genuinely earn it. Confidence without control is fragile, it shatters under the first real challenge. Discipline without clarity is exhausting. Ambition without emotional regulation is simply self-sabotage wearing a productive mask. The inner game is your operating system. When it is weak, small challenges feel like crises. When it is strong, genuine crises become manageable. Look at how people respond when something doesn't go their way. Some panic. Some blame. Some go silent and shut down. Some explode. These are not personality traits. They are symptoms of an untrained inner game. A trained mind does not eliminate emotion. It organizes emotion. It creates space between what happens and how you respond. It slows the moment down, just barely, just enough, for choice to exist. That space is everything. Because the instant you react automatically, you have handed your power to whatever triggered you. A comment. A tone. A delay. A look. A failure. That trigger becomes the leader and you become the follower. Winning the inner game means reclaiming that position. It means becoming the kind of person who cannot easily be pulled off course. Not because life becomes easier. Because you become steadier. And steadiness is built, not inherited. Most people allow their inner world to be shaped entirely by what happens around them. News. Feeds, other people's moods, unexpected obstacles, social comparison. They live in perpetual reaction mode. And reaction mode is dangerous. In reaction mode, your standards drop without you noticing. Your patience disappears. Your long-term thinking collapses into the shortest possible path to short-term relief. You say things you later regret. You make decisions you justify to yourself, instead of decisions you can genuinely respect. Exiting reaction mode permanently requires one foundational shift, becoming proactive about your mental state rather than passive. This starts with awareness. You cannot manage what you have not noticed. Most people do not notice their internal dialogue. They do not notice the tension that accumulates in their body when pressure arrives. They do not notice how quickly their focus fractures when stress enters the room. Training begins with noticing, without judgment. Notice when your mind rushes ahead to the worst version of the outcome. Notice when it gravitates toward comfort instead of forward motion. Notice when it starts building a case for why you should quit, slow down, or react. Noticing is not weakness. Noticing is the first act of discipline. Once you notice, you can interrupt. The interruption is where real training becomes real. When you feel the impulse to react, pause, not to suppress the emotion, but to observe it from a slight distance. Then ask yourself one question: what would a controlled response look like right now? That single question begins moving power back to you. Controlled responses are rarely dramatic. They do not feel impressive in the moment. They do not release the tension immediately. But they protect your long-term position in ways that emotional reactions never can. Emotional reactions feel powerful for seconds. Controlled responses build power over years. This is where most people fail the inner game. They consistently choose relief over respect. They choose the expression of emotion over the effectiveness of control. They trade long-term leverage for short-term comfort. And they do it again and again, slowly dismantling the self-trust they need to ever operate at their highest level. The trained mind understands something fundamental: every situation has two layers. The external event, and your internal response. You do not control the event. You always control the response. The moment you confuse those two layers, you lose leverage permanently. People speak in ways that reveal their surrender without knowing it. She made me angry. He stressed me out. That situation forced my hand. Those statements feel honest. They feel like accurate descriptions of reality. But they are quiet admissions of helplessness. When you credit external forces with ownership of your internal state, you accept weakness without realizing it. Nothing makes you react. You react because your mind was not trained to pause first. But that pause can be built. In the beginning, the pause feels uncomfortable. You will feel the pressure to respond immediately. To defend, to explain, to push back, to prove. That pressure is the training signal. Just as muscle soreness tells you physical growth is happening, mental discomfort tells you the inner game is being challenged. Most people escape that discomfort by distracting themselves, by justifying their reaction, by telling themselves, "That's just who I am." But that sentence is a lie. Who you are under pressure is not fixed. It is trained. The inner game is built through small, unglamorous repetitions. You do not wait for high stakes moments to practice inner control. You practice it in daily minor frustrations. In traffic. In misunderstandings. In delays. In moments where someone dismisses you and part of you wants to make sure they know they were wrong. Those moments are not interruptions to your training. They are the training. If you cannot stay composed in small situations, you will not suddenly find composure in the large ones. Composure is not a switch you flip. It is a muscle you develop through consistent, deliberate use. This is why winning starts inside. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you build trust with yourself. You reinforce a new identity: I am someone who stays in control. That identity compounds. Your body begins to stay calmer under pressure. Your thoughts scatter less when stress arrives. Your breathing stabilizes faster. Not because life improved, because your internal standards rose. Standards are the backbone of the inner game. A standard is a rule you follow regardless of your mood. I do not raise my voice to feel powerful. I do not rush decisions to escape discomfort. I do not explain myself when silence would serve me better. Standards feel restrictive at first. But they create freedom, freedom from emotional chaos, freedom from regret, freedom from being pulled into battles that never deserved your energy. Winning the inner game also requires learning to choose battles intelligently. Not every comment deserves a response. Not every disagreement deserves engagement. Untrained minds feel compelled to react to everything. Trained minds are selective. Selectivity is strength. Where your attention goes, your life follows. When you stop reacting to everything, your attention becomes one of the most powerful things you own. Patience is another dimension of the inner game that most people underestimate. Patience is not passive waiting. It is maintaining control while time does its work. Impatient minds force outcomes. They speak before they should. They act before the moment is ready. They reveal weakness without knowing it. Patient minds observe. They choose timing deliberately. And timing, knowing when to move and when to hold, is one of the rarest and most powerful skills a person can develop. Winning your inner game does not mean you stop feeling emotion. It means emotion stops dictating your behavior. You can feel anger without acting on it. You can feel fear without retreating from it. You can feel uncertainty without freezing inside it. That separation between feeling and action, that gap, is mastery. The goal of mental training is not to suppress what you feel. It is to prevent feelings from hijacking what you do. Once you understand this clearly, you stop fighting yourself. You stop trying to manufacture calm in every moment. You focus instead on maintaining control, and control is neutral, grounded, and reliable. Every external win is preceded by an internal one. If you lose the inner game, no strategy, no talent, and no opportunity will save you. But if you win the inner game, even setbacks become workable. Even failure becomes data rather than verdict. Even loss becomes a foundation rather than a conclusion. This is where everything begins. Not with confidence. Not with motivation. With control. Chapter 2, Discipline over Feelings. Most people have built their entire lives on a deeply flawed system. They wake up each morning and immediately consult their feelings. They assess how they feel, tired, motivated, anxious, flat. And then allow that assessment to determine what they will and will not do today. That habit, more than almost any other, quietly dismantles the life people claim to want. Feelings are unstable. They shift with sleep quality, nutrition, social interaction, criticism, praise, weather, and 1,000 other variables you do not control. If your actions are governed by how you feel, your life will be inconsistent by design. You will make progress on the day's feelings, cooperate and lose ground on the days they don't. And feelings do not cooperate nearly as often as ambition requires. Discipline exists to solve exactly this problem. Discipline is not self-punishment. It is not about forcing yourself through pain to prove something to yourself. Discipline is about removing the conversation from moments where that conversation only weakens you. A disciplined mind does not renegotiate with itself every morning about whether today is the day to act on its commitments. It follows standards. Untrained minds negotiate constantly. I will do it later when I feel ready. I do not feel like it today. I will start again when motivation comes back. Those negotiations feel reasonable in the moment. They feel like self-compassion. But they are quietly destroying something critical, self-trust. Every time you delay because of how you feel, you teach your mind that comfort has authority over your choices. And once comfort becomes the authority, discipline does not just weaken. It collapses. Here is the truth that changes everything: feelings are information, not instruction. They tell you what is happening internally. They do not tell you what to do. When feelings become the instruction, behavior becomes reactive and unreliable. The person who operates this way cannot be counted on, not by others, and not by themselves. Strong minds learn to separate emotion from execution. They feel resistance and act anyway. They feel fear and move forward anyway. They feel boredom and stay consistent anyway. Not because they have stopped feeling, but because they understand something most people never learn. Progress does not require motivation. Progress requires standards. A standard is a rule you follow even when you do not feel like following it. You do not brush your teeth only when you feel energized. You do not stop at traffic lights based on mood. You do not honor your most important commitments only when you feel inspired. Those behaviors are automated through standards, non-negotiable, mood-independent, identity-level standards. Mental discipline works through the same mechanism. You decide in advance who you are and how you behave. Then you execute that decision regardless of the emotional weather that day. This removes the friction of constant internal deliberation. Instead of asking, "Do I feel like it?" you ask one cleaner question: is this aligned with my standard? That question simplifies everything. It short-circuits the negotiation before it can begin. Most emotional exhaustion does not come from the effort of doing things. It comes from the energy spent deciding whether to do them. Indecision drains more mental resources than action. Discipline reduces that drain. It creates predictability within your own behavior. And predictability builds the most important form of trust, not trust from others, but trust from yourself. When you trust yourself to follow through consistently, you stop overthinking. You stop seeking external validation before you move. You stop second-guessing decisions that should have been automatic. You simply act. This is why disciplined people appear confident even when they are uncertain. They are not guessing who they will be today. They already decided. Feelings still show up. They always will. But they lose their veto power over your behavior. This becomes especially critical under pressure. Pressure amplifies emotion. Stress makes feelings louder. Fatigue makes the negotiation with yourself feel more persuasive than ever. That is precisely when standards matter most. In difficult moments, you do not rise to the level of your potential. You fall to the level of your discipline. If your discipline is weak, pressure exposes it. If your discipline is strong, pressure sharpens it. Many people misunderstand discipline as a form of suffering, as restriction, as deprivation, as the thing that takes away enjoyment. That misunderstanding keeps them weak. Discipline is not suffering. Discipline is freedom. When you are not disciplined, you become a servant of your impulses. Every craving, every fear, every uncomfortable feeling pulls you in a different direction. You are not free. You are reactive. Discipline eliminates that servitude. It frees you from the chaos of living inside your own emotional fluctuations. A disciplined person does not wait to feel ready before beginning. They understand that readiness is produced by action, not by waiting. The feeling of being ready almost never arrives on its own. It is earned through the act of starting before you feel ready. Do the thing, then feel the momentum build. From having done it. The shift from feeling-driven behavior to standard-driven behavior is a process, not an event. It begins with identifying your non-negotiables, the behaviors that define who you are regardless of circumstances. Not aspirations. Not goals for good days. Non-negotiable standards for every day. Then you execute those standards before feelings have time to vote. You do not consult your emotions first. You act first. Emotion follows action far more reliably than action follows emotion. This is one of the most important things mental training will ever teach you. Discipline is not about being harsh with yourself. It is about being reliable. Reliable to your commitments. Reliable to your standards. Reliable to the version of yourself you are actively constructing. In every situation, without exception, feelings will try to lead. Let discipline lead. Instead. Chapter 3, Stay calm under pressure. Pressure does not create weakness. It reveals it. When pressure arrives, it does not change who you are. It simply removes the layers you use to hide what you have not yet trained. Most people believe calm is a personality trait, something distributed unevenly at birth. Something you either have or don't. That belief is comfortable because it removes responsibility. If calm is a trait, you cannot be expected to develop it. But that belief is wrong, and it keeps people fragile. Calm is a skill. And like every skill, it can be trained, refined, and made reliable under conditions that would destroy an untrained baseline. Under pressure, the body responds first. Breathing shortens. Muscles contract. Thoughts accelerate. Heart rate climbs. If you do not catch these signals early, your mind loses its footing before you even register what is happening. Once the body enters fight or flight, the thinking brain becomes secondary. That is why people say things under pressure they would never say from a stable state. That is why decisions made in panic rarely hold up in daylight. This means that staying calm does not begin with willpower. It begins with awareness. You do not force calm. You create the conditions for it, and you do that by noticing what is happening in your body before it reaches your mind. Untrained minds try to push through pressure by gripping harder. They clench. They rush. They try to override their own signals through sheer force of will. That approach works briefly, then collapses. Trained minds move in the opposite direction. They deliberately slow the moment down. They widen their awareness instead of narrowing it under the grip of panic. They reduce internal urgency before taking action. This is not passivity. It is strategy. Calm expands your options. Panic removes them. In high-pressure situations, speed feels powerful. But speed without clarity is one of the most dangerous states a person can operate from. The majority of bad decisions are not made because people lacked intelligence. They are made because people moved too fast. Calm is what allows you to see what actually matters, to distinguish between what is urgent and what is merely loud. When others rush, you observe. When others react emotionally, you remain neutral. That neutrality is not indifference. It is leverage. Pressure affects everyone in the room. But not everyone responds the same way. Those who stay calm become the anchors, the decision makers, the voices of direction, not because they are louder or more impressive, but because they are steady. And steadiness signals safety. It pulls people toward you rather than pushing them away. This is important to understand. Calm does not mean the absence of fear. It does not mean you feel nothing. It means fear does not control your behavior. You can feel pressure fully, genuinely feel it, and still think clearly inside it. The mistake most people make is waiting until they feel calm before they act. That moment rarely arrives on its own. You do not wait for calm. You train it into existence. Calm is built through repeated exposure to pressure, not through the avoidance of it. You do not develop tolerance by escaping stress. You develop it by staying present inside stress, in measured doses, in environments you can observe and process. When something triggers you, that is not failure. That is the training presenting itself. Instead of reacting, you pause. Instead of escalating, you breathe. Instead of collapsing into the emotion, you ground yourself in your body first. Grounding is practical and immediate. Slow the breath deliberately, not a deep theatrical breath, but a slow, controlled exhale. Drop the shoulders consciously. Release the jaw. These physical actions communicate directly to the nervous system. There is no emergency. We are not in danger. Once the body settles, the mind follows. This sequence matters deeply. The mind does not calm the body under pressure. The body calms the mind. Trying to think your way to calm while your nervous system is in full alarm will never work consistently. You work from the outside in. Over time, with consistent exposure, your nervous system adapts its threshold. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable, not because the pressure disappeared, but because your capacity to hold pressure increased. Capacity is strength. People who can carry pressure can carry responsibility, complexity, leadership, uncertainty. That is why calm is not just a personal virtue. It is a genuine competitive advantage. In every domain, in work, in conflict, in relationships, in negotiation, the person who stays calm when others do not is the person who controls the outcome. When others lose clarity, you gain it. When others speak impulsively and regret it, you choose your words and build from them. When others rush toward resolution out of discomfort, you control timing. And timing, in almost every important situation, decides outcomes. Many conflicts escalate unnecessarily because no one in the room was trained to de-escalate. No one had the composure to lower the temperature instead of raising it. One calm person changes the entire dynamic of a room. Not through force. Not through argument. Through steadiness. Others slow down to match it. They mirror it. They reconsider positions they would have defended reactively if the temperature had remained high. Calm also protects you from the costliest mistakes, the ones born from words spoken too quickly. From decisions made in emotional heat, from actions taken before the full picture was visible. Most regret traces back to moments of reactivity. Staying calm creates the space to act in alignment with your actual values, not just your emotional state of the moment. That alignment builds self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation everything else rests on. Over time, with training, calm stops feeling like an achievement. It begins to feel like your natural state. Not because life softened, but because you stopped feeding urgency. Most urgency is manufactured. Most pressure is exaggerated by a mind that has not yet been taught to pause before amplifying. A trained mind sees this clearly. It understands that almost nothing requires an immediate reaction. Almost everything benefits from a measured one. The ability to pause under pressure is one of the highest expressions of discipline available to a human being. It is the difference between being controlled by events and being in control of yourself. Calm is not weakness. Calm is the highest form of control. And control wins in every situation. Chapter 4, Control Your Reactions. Reactions feel automatic. But they are not uncontrollable. They are habits, deeply ingrained. Frequently reinforced, emotionally rewarding habits. And like all habits, with the right approach, they can be retrained. Most people believe their reactions are honest. They believe that reacting quickly is a form of authenticity, that holding back is somehow dishonest or weak. They have confused expression with strength. They have convinced themselves that saying exactly what they feel the moment they feel it is a form of integrity. In reality, reaction without thought is surrender. The moment you react without pausing first, you hand control of the situation to whatever triggered you. A tone of voice. A delayed response. An unexpected disappointment. A careless word. That trigger becomes the authority. You become its consequence. Strong minds reverse that dynamic. They do not eliminate reaction. They delay it. And that delay, that brief, deliberate gap, is the difference between being provoked and being powerful. Reactions collapse space. Responses create space. Space allows choice. Choice restores control. This is why the pause is not a technique. It is the foundation of all mental strength. When something triggers you, your first instinct is speed. You want to answer immediately, to defend your position, to explain yourself, to push back against whatever just happened. Speed feels like strength in that moment. But speed under emotion is almost always weakness in disguise. The pause feels deeply uncomfortable because it interrupts a familiar pattern. Your mind will apply pressure, say something now, "Don't let this go, you'll look passive if you wait." That pressure is a lie. Silence does not weaken your position. An uncontrolled reaction does. People respect those who are not easily moved. They sense self-command. They sense stability. And that sensing happens before any words are exchanged. Reactive people are easy to manipulate. Because they advertise their triggers. Every time they react, they reveal exactly which buttons produce which responses. A trained mind conceals those triggers, not out of deception, but out of self-command. When you don't react, people lose the leverage they were counting on. This does not mean becoming cold or disconnected. It means choosing when and how you engage, rather than allowing circumstances to make that choice for you. You do not need to win every exchange. You need to win your composure. And composure alone changes the dynamics of almost every interaction you will ever have. When you stop reacting, others frequently escalate. They expected resistance. They expected matching emotion. When it doesn't come, their momentum falters. They become uncertain. They adjust. You gain ground without having fought for it. This is not a tactic, it is a natural and reliable consequence of self-control consistently applied. Reactions also distort reality in ways most people never recognize. When emotion rises, your perception narrows. You hear less of what is actually being communicated. You assume more about intentions than the evidence supports. You misinterpret the meaning behind behavior. Arguments escalate not because people disagree but because two reactive minds are each hearing a distorted version of what the other is saying. One controlled mind in that environment changes everything. It introduces stability into chaos. It slows the exchange down to a speed where understanding becomes possible. The key is not suppression. Suppressing emotion builds internal pressure that eventually finds a way out, often at the worst possible moment. The key is observation. When you observe an emotion instead of immediately acting from it, you weaken its grip. When you notice a reaction forming, name it internally: anger, defensiveness, impatience, hurt. That single act of labeling creates distance. Distance restores agency. And once you have agency, you can choose a response that aligns with who you actually want to be rather than who the situation is trying to make you. Sometimes the strongest possible response is no response at all. Not avoidance. Not fear. Not suppression. Restraint. Restraint is chronically misunderstood. It is not weakness. It is delayed power, power held in reserve until the timing and the approach serve you rather than your emotion. Power applied at the right moment is infinitely more effective than power applied the instant it is felt. This principle applies across every context of life. In conversation. In negotiation. In conflict. In leadership. Those who react first reveal the most and gain the least. Those who wait and choose control the frame. And controlling the frame means controlling the outcome far more often than force ever could. Mastering your reactions also protects your energy in ways that compound over time. Every emotional reaction costs mental resources. Reactive people are chronically drained because they are constantly fighting battles that were never worth fighting. Controlled people conserve that energy for what genuinely matters. That conservation compounds into less regret, less residual stress, more clarity, and better decisions across every dimension of life. Over time, with consistent practice, your reactions begin to slow on their own, not because you are forcing restraint through willpower, but because restraint has become part of your identity. I am Someone who does not give my power away. That identity is strong. It makes you difficult to destabilize, difficult to rush, difficult to manipulate through emotion or urgency. In a world built on noise, on reactive culture, on instant expression and constant provocation, a mind that controls its reactions is genuinely rare. It is a structural advantage that compounds every single day. Control your reactions, and you control far more than a moment. You control your direction. You control your reputation. You control outcomes that would otherwise control you. Chapter 5, Build Mental Endurance. Mental endurance is not about how hard you can push in a single moment. It is about how long you can sustain without collapsing. Most people can perform under pressure for a short burst. Very few can remain consistent when discomfort lingers, when results are delayed, when effort feels unrewarded and the gap between where they are and where they want to be feels like it is not closing. That difference in staying power, not talent, not intelligence, not strategy, is what ultimately decides outcomes. Mental endurance is the capacity to remain steady and functional when motivation has faded, when the novelty of a pursuit has worn off, when visible progress has stalled, and when the easier option is constantly available. This is where most people quit. Not because they are incapable of continuing, but because they are no longer comfortable. And the mind, untrained, is wired to treat discomfort as a signal to stop. The mind seeks relief. It seeks distraction, escape, anything that reduces the sensation of effort that is not producing immediate reward. When discomfort arrives, an untrained mind reads it as a warning: something is wrong, this isn't working, this is too hard, I should stop. Those thoughts feel entirely convincing in the moment. They feel like wisdom. They are not. They are resistance. And resistance appears precisely at the threshold of growth. If you stop every time resistance shows up, you train your mind to retreat from the exact territory where development lives. Mental endurance is built by learning to stay present inside discomfort rather than immediately engineering an exit. This does not mean forcing yourself to exhaustion. It means not quitting at the first sign of unease. It means learning to distinguish between the discomfort that signals growth and the damage that signals genuine harm. Initial discomfort is almost always harmless. It is the nervous system adjusting to effort. Quitting inside that initial discomfort teaches the mind that effort is dangerous and that retreat is the appropriate response to challenge. Staying just slightly longer than feels comfortable teaches a different lesson, one that compounds into something remarkable over time. Effort is survivable. I am stronger than this feeling. That lesson, repeated enough times, reshapes your baseline. What once felt overwhelming gradually becomes familiar. What once felt like a wall gradually becomes a threshold you know how to cross. Not because the challenge softened. Because you built the capacity to meet it. Endurance extends far beyond physical effort. It shows up in the ability to sustain focus on a difficult task without reaching for distraction. In the ability to tolerate boredom without abandoning the work that boredom is covering. In the ability to continue building something when the results are invisible and the validation has completely stopped. These are endurance tests. And modern life, with its architecture of instant feedback and constant stimulation, trains the exact opposite. It trains the mind to expect immediate reward and to interpret the absence of that reward as failure. A trained mind resists that conditioning. It creates deliberate constraints, not because comfort is the enemy, but because unearned comfort erodes the very resilience that difficult pursuits require. Endurance is built through a simple but demanding practice, choosing the harder option when the easier one is fully available. Staying focused when switching would feel like relief. Finishing when abandoning would feel justified. Waiting when rushing would feel productive. These choices seem small individually, but they accumulate into something decisive, an identity. I am someone who stays. When that identity takes root, the question you ask yourself at the threshold of difficulty changes. Instead of asking how do I escape this, you ask how do I remain steady through this. That shift in question is a shift in who you are. Mental endurance also changes your relationship with failure in ways that unlock entirely different levels of performance. Untrained minds treat failure as a verdict. They personalize it, attach meaning to it immediately, collapse toward conclusions. This proves I am not enough, this was never going to work, I always end up here. Those conclusions feel logical in the moment. They feel like honest assessment. But they are shortcuts, emotional exits disguised as insight. An enduring mind stays with the experience longer before assigning meaning. It separates outcome from identity. Failure becomes data, information about what to adjust, rather than a judgment about what you fundamentally are. When failure cannot attack your identity, you stop quitting to protect your ego. You adjust and continue. You absorb the setback without spiraling inward. You feel the disappointment without letting it redirect your trajectory. This emotional stability comes from one source, the accumulated experience of staying with effort that did not immediately pay off. Your nervous system learns that setbacks are survivable. And when you know something is survivable, you stop fearing it. And when fear shrinks, ambition expands. Silence is an overlooked dimension of mental endurance. The ability to sit in silence without reaching for noise or distraction is itself a form of training. Many people cannot tolerate the absence of stimulation. They fill every quiet moment with sound, with scrolling, with opinion, with distraction. A mind with genuine endurance can rest in silence without agitation. And in that silence, perception sharpens. Patterns become visible. The signal separates clearly from the noise. When you are always stimulated, your mind never develops its capacity to hold sustained focus. Endurance includes the ability to remain with your own thoughts without escaping them. Routine matters here more than most people acknowledge. Simple, predictable routines eliminate decision fatigue. They remove the daily renegotiation about whether to continue. When effort is predictable, endurance increases naturally, because you are not depleting willpower on the decision to begin. Beginning becomes automatic. Continuation becomes default. Endurance also teaches something that cannot be taught any other way, humility. When you stay with something long enough, you develop genuine respect for process. You stop demanding immediate outcomes. You stop expecting emotional rewards for showing up. You begin to understand that progress is often quiet, invisible, and unremarkable in the moment. Quiet progress is sustainable. Loud progress attracts attention but frequently burns out. A trained mind has learned to prefer stability over spectacle. The question that separates immature thinking from mature thinking is this: instead of asking what do I get from this today, you ask who am I becoming through this? That question changes your priorities at the deepest level. Short-term validation stops being the currency you are chasing. Long-term capacity becomes what you are building. And capacity, the ability to carry more, endure more, produce more consistently, is what ultimately determines the ceiling of your life. Mental endurance levels the playing field. It allows ordinary people to produce extraordinary results simply by remaining present longer than others are willing to. Most competition disappears when endurance is high. Not because others are less capable, but because they stop showing up before. The compound effect of consistent effort has a chance to produce results. Build your endurance. Stay when leaving is available. Continue when stopping feels justified. Remain when every comfortable instinct is pointing toward the exit. Endurance is not dramatic. It is not glamorous. It is reliable. And reliability wins more often than intensity, talent, or brilliance ever will. Chapter 6: Think clearly in chaos. Chaos does not prevent clear thinking. An untrained mind prevents clear thinking. Chaos is simply the environment, neutral, impersonal, indifferent to your emotional response to it. What happens inside you when chaos arrives is entirely within the domain of training. Most people believe that clear thinking is a luxury available only in calm conditions. They believe that when the environment becomes turbulent, the thinking brain becomes unavailable. This belief keeps them permanently dependent on circumstances they cannot control. In reality, clarity under pressure is a skill, one that develops through training and degrades through avoidance. When chaos arrives, the untrained mind narrows. It locks onto the threat, the disruption, the uncertainty, and it cannot see past it. This narrowing is biological. It is the nervous system prioritizing immediate survival over long-term thinking. But that biological default can be overridden by a mind that has been conditioned to widen its awareness precisely when every instinct says to narrow it. The first step in thinking clearly inside chaos is refusing to amplify it. Chaos already contains enough genuine noise without your mind adding its own. When you catastrophize, when you assume the worst outcome is the most likely one, when you allow your imagination to extrapolate disaster from uncertainty, you are not responding to chaos, you are generating additional chaos. From the inside. A trained mind notices this pattern and refuses to feed it. The second step is reducing the complexity of the problem to what is actually controllable right now. Chaos creates the illusion that everything is moving at once, that everything must be addressed simultaneously, that the scale of the situation demands a scale of response that your current resources cannot supply. This illusion paralyzes. The antidote is simplification. In any chaotic situation, there are a limited number of variables you actually influence. A trained mind finds those variables immediately and ignores the rest. Not because the rest are unimportant, but because attention directed toward the uncontrollable is attention removed from the controllable. The third step is slowing your internal pace. Chaos creates urgency. Most of that urgency is false. The pressure to respond immediately to everything is manufactured by an untrained nervous system that has not yet learned to distinguish between what is genuinely time-sensitive and what merely feels that way. When you slow your internal pace, deliberately, consciously, chaos loses its grip. You begin to see it accurately rather than through the distortion of panic. Clear thinking in chaos also requires that you separate facts from interpretations. Facts are what actually happened. Interpretations are the meaning your mind assigns to what happened, and interpretations under emotional pressure are almost always distorted. The fact is, this meeting did not go well. The interpretation is, this is a disaster and everything is falling apart. The fact is, this project hit a significant obstacle. The interpretation is, I am not capable enough to solve it. Training your mind to stay with facts and delay interpretations gives you access to information the reactive mind never reaches, because the reactive mind replaces information with story the moment something goes wrong. Another critical component of clarity under chaos is focus management. In chaotic environments, The number of inputs competing for your attention multiplies. Notifications, conversations, demands, opinions, noise, all of it arriving simultaneously. An untrained mind responds to everything, which means it focuses on nothing. A trained mind selects. It decides in advance what deserves attention and what does not. It protects that decision from the constant pull of the environment. This selectivity is not natural. It must be practiced in low-stakes environments before it becomes accessible in high-stakes ones. You practice it by staying with one task without switching even when the pull to switch is present. You practice it by allowing uncomfortable information to exist without immediately trying to resolve the discomfort it creates. You practice it by finishing one thing completely before beginning the next, even when the incomplete things are generating noise. Clear thinking in chaos is also supported by what you do before chaos arrives. The mind that enters a chaotic situation already depleted, already emotionally activated, already running on poor sleep, already engaged in multiple unresolved conflicts, has almost no capacity to think clearly once the pressure intensifies. Preparation is not exciting. Recovery is. But preparation is what produces clarity when the moment demands it. The trained mind builds reserves before the withdrawal is required. It maintains a baseline through consistent sleep, through exercise that regulates the nervous system, through silence that allows the mind to consolidate rather than constantly process new input. These habits are not self-care in the popular sense. They are strategic preparation for the demands that chaos places on cognitive function. Finally, clear thinking in chaos requires accepting uncertainty without being destabilized by it. The untrained mind needs resolution before it can function. It needs to know how things will turn out. Needs guarantees, needs the story to have a clear ending before it will invest in writing the next chapter. Chaos does not provide those guarantees. Neither does life. The trained mind learns to hold uncertainty without collapsing under its weight. It learns to operate effectively with incomplete information. It learns to make good decisions without all the facts, adjust when new facts arrive, and continue moving without the certainty it wishes it had. Clarity does not require calm surroundings. It requires a calm mind. And a calm mind in chaotic surroundings is built through training, through the deliberate practice of staying present, staying selective, staying factual, and staying in motion when every untrained impulse says to stop. Think clearly. Not when it is easy. When it matters. Chapter 7, Train the Voice Inside Your Head. There is a voice inside your head that never stops speaking. It is with you in every conversation, every challenge, every moment of pressure and uncertainty. Most people have never stopped to seriously examine what this voice is saying, or how much of their life it is quietly determining. The inner voice is not neutral. Discomfort. And if you have not trained it, it will succeed. You will listen. You will pull back. You will let it determine the outcome. A trained inner voice under pressure does something entirely different. It becomes an anchor rather than an alarm. It narrows attention to what can be controlled in this moment. It produces instructions rather than anxiety. Breathe, focus, what is the next right action, stay present. It reminds you of evidence rather than projection. I have been here before, I have continued, I can continue now. The language of your inner voice also shapes your identity in ways that accumulate invisibly over time. When you habitually speak to yourself in ways that shrink you, I always do this, I am not someone who can handle this, this is typical of me, you are not describing yourself. You are programming yourself. That programming runs in the background of every decision you make. The language of a trained inner voice is different. It is specific rather than global. It is present. Focused rather than deterministic. It acknowledges difficulty without catastrophizing it. It holds you accountable without attacking your worth. It speaks to you the way a demanding mentor would. Honestly, directly, without cruelty, but without softness that would leave you unprepared for what is actually required. Training the inner voice is a long-term project. Old narratives do not dissolve after a single session of interrogation. They have been reinforced for years. They will reassert themselves. The training is in the returning, noticing when the old voice takes over, catching it as early as possible, and redirecting it toward a more accurate, more demanding, more useful narrative. Over time, the voice changes. Not because life became easier. Because you stopped letting an untrained, unchallenged narrative determine what you attempt, what you sustain, and what you ultimately become. Train the voice. Because the voice you live with is the life you live. Chapter 8, Show Up No Matter What. Everything in this audiobook ultimately points toward one non-negotiable behavior. Show up. Not when it is convenient. Not when you feel prepared. Not when motivation is high and conditions are favorable. Show up as a non-negotiable standard, applied without exception, independent of how you feel, what you have lost, or how far the outcome still feels from where you currently stand. Showing up is the most underrated force in human performance. People search for strategies, systems, secrets, advantages. They overlook the single behavior that produces more results than any of those: being present consistently, doing the work when it is boring, when it is hard, when the results are invisible, when no one is watching and the choice to stop would be entirely justified to anyone observing. Consistency is not the same as perfection. A trained mind understands this distinction clearly. Perfection demands that every session be excellent, that every effort be at full capacity, that every showing up produce measurable results. Those demands are incompatible with the reality of long-term effort. There will be days when your performance is below what you are capable of. There will be sessions where you accomplish almost nothing by measurable standards. The trained mind shows up on those days anyway, not because the session will be productive, but because showing up protects continuity. And continuity is the mechanism through which compound results are produced. The power of consistency lives in what most people never stay long enough to experience: the compounding effect of ordinary effort sustained over extraordinary periods of time. Small actions repeated every day do not add up linearly. They multiply. Skills deepen. Habits solidify. Neural pathways become highways. Identity locks in. From the outside, results appear suddenly, as if overnight. From the inside, it feels like inevitability. That inevitability is earned, not by dramatic moments of heroic effort, but by the quiet, ordinary, repeated decision to show up. Showing up without conditions also builds self-trust in a way that nothing else can replicate. Every time you follow through on a commitment to yourself, especially when every comfortable instinct said not to, you add a deposit to the account of your own credibility with yourself. When that account is full, confidence is not fragile. It is structural. It does not depend on external validation or on recent success. It rests on the knowledge of what you have been willing to do when it was hardest. Most people want guarantees before they invest themselves. They want proof that the effort will produce the outcome before they are willing to make the effort. Life does not operate on those terms. Progress rewards consistent participation, not certainty. The people who eventually gain the Most leverage are the ones who showed up without guarantees, who invested effort before the return was visible, who stayed present before the momentum was established. Once momentum exists, continuing requires less energy than stopping. The hardest part of any consistent effort is the beginning, and the re-beginning after every interruption. A trained mind protects continuity not because it is rigid, but because it understands what restarts cost. Every restart depletes motivation, disrupts rhythm, and requires the nervous system to overcome the inertia of absence all over again. It is far more efficient to maintain presence than to rebuild it. Boredom is one of the most powerful tests of this principle, and one of the most misunderstood. Boredom is not a signal that something is wrong. Boredom is a signal that novelty has ended and depth has begun. Depth is where mastery forms. Depth is what separates the person who knows something from the person who has become it. When the novelty of a pursuit disappears, what remains is the work itself, stripped of excitement, stripped of social reward, stripped of the emotional energy that made beginning feel easy. Staying with the work at that stage, when it is no longer stimulating, when it no longer produces the feeling of progress, that is when skill deepens at its fastest rate. The people who leave at the boredom threshold stay average. The people who remain move beyond it permanently. Showing up also trains your relationship with excuses. Excuses are not the problem, they are the symptom of a mind that has decided attendance is optional. When attendance is non-negotiable, excuses lose their audience. There is no one inside you to persuade. The question of whether to show up has already been resolved. You act. You do not explain. You do not justify. You execute. And move forward. This simplicity is liberating in ways that are difficult to communicate to someone who has not experienced it. When the decision has been made in advance, I show up, without conditions. Without emotional permission, an enormous amount of internal friction disappears. That energy, previously spent deliberating, becomes available for the actual work. The result is not just more output. It is cleaner, less burdened output. Over time, showing up stops feeling like discipline. It becomes identity. And once it is identity, resistance fades because resistance has nothing to grip. You do not fight yourself to begin. Beginning happens because that is who you are. Discipline at that level feels lighter, not because effort decreased, but because the war against yourself has ended. Your life does not become easier. You become steadier. And steadiness, the quiet, reliable, unglamorous quality of someone who always appears, is the most underrated competitive advantage available to any human being. Steady people are not spectacular. They are effective. They do not spike and crash. They build. And building, one consistent session, one reliable day, one shown-up commitment at a time, creates outcomes that look sudden to the outside world and feel inevitable from within. Show up. Without conditions. Without emotional permission. Without waiting for the right moment. Or the right feeling or the right circumstances. Show up because that is the non-negotiable standard to which you hold yourself. Show up, and over time, everything follows. O Utero. You have reached the end of this audiobook. But the real work is not finished. It is just beginning. What you have encountered over these 70 minutes is not inspiration. It is not a collection of ideas to feel good about for a few days before returning to your previous patterns. It is a training framework, a system for operating when life applies full pressure and everything inside you wants to collapse, retreat, or react. You were introduced to 8 core principles. Win the inner game. Choose discipline over feelings. Stay calm under pressure. Control your reactions. Build mental endurance. Think clearly in chaos. Train your self-talk. Show up without conditions. These are not separate ideas. They reinforce each other at every point. Together they form a system, a complete architecture for remaining functional, deliberate, and controlled in situations that break untrained minds. This system does not require exceptional talent. It does not demand perfection. It demands one thing: consistency. Consistency in how you respond when pressure arrives. Consistency in the standards you hold regardless of circumstances. Consistency in the behavior of showing up even when every comfortable instinct says the timing is wrong. That consistency becomes identity. And identity is more powerful and more durable than motivation will ever be. As you move forward, do not attempt to apply everything simultaneously. Training does not work through overwhelm. Choose one principle. Practice it deliberately, in the real conditions of your actual life. Notice when emotion tries to lead. Notice when urgency tries to rush you. Notice when discomfort tries to push you toward the exit. Those moments are not obstacles to training. They are the training itself. Use them. Pause. Breathe. Choose. That simple three-step sequence: pause, breathe, choose, creates the space in which all mental strength is built. In that space, you reclaim control. You do not need to eliminate pressure. Pressure is not going away. You need to expand your capacity to carry it, to hold more challenge, more uncertainty, more responsibility without losing clarity. That is mental strength. And mental strength is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not seek acknowledgement. It shows up in the decision that did not need to be explained. In the restraint that would have been easy to abandon. In the consistency that continued long after motivation provided any support. Over time, those choices compound. Not dramatically, reliably. And reliability wins more often than intensity, more often than talent, more often than circumstance. There will be times when no one sees your effort. When no one acknowledges your restraint. When no one validates your consistency. That is normal. Mental strength is built in private. The reward is not applause. The reward is stability, in how you think, in how you act, in how you navigate pressure. That stability changes how life responds to you. People trust you differently. Situations feel less capable of overwhelming you. Decisions arrive cleaner. Not because the world became easier. Because you became harder to shake. You did not become rigid. You became grounded. That is the goal. When you are tested again, and you will be, remember this, you are not failing. You are training. Return to the principles. Apply them without drama. Keep moving forward. That is how control becomes natural. And when control becomes natural, winning stops being something you hope for. It becomes something you do. Train your mind. Not when it is easy. Not when you feel inspired. Train it when emotions are elevated, when pressure is building, when results are uncertain and the outcome is unclear. Those are the moments that determine everything. You may not control every situation that arrives. But you always control your response to it. And when you control your response, you control your direction. That is how winning actually happens. Not by chance. Not by luck. Not by waiting for better conditions or better timing or a better version of yourself to appear. By training. Train your mind, and you will be ready for every situation that comes.